Return of the Mount Hua Sect. Chapter 252. I dug my own grave. He didn't come out of the room either today. Yes, he didn't, young master. Hwang Jonggi's eyes frowned. How is he eating? He has asked us to leave food in a tray in front of the door and leave, since he keeps it out after eating. He slowly turned his head to look in the direction of the room where Chongmyung was sitting. What is he doing? We don't get to enter the room, so I don't know. Seriously. The door that had been firmly shut showed no signs of opening, and for 3 days, Chongmyung didn't step out of the room. He is Chongmyung, a disciple who had been recognized by Gangho, so even if he is up to something, it can be easily solved. But still, as a human, I cannot help but feel frustrated. It felt like he was doing something very important, and Hwang Jonggi wanted to sneak a look. Then, it was when he was thinking of doing something. This is crazy! Hwang Jonggi slowly closed his mouth. A huge scream came from inside the room. At this point, it didn't even surprise Hwang Jonggi anymore. Even the servant who was in front of him didn't seem to care. Well, it is the 3rd day. Yes, young master, it has been like that. It has been like that for the past 3 days. Seriously. Hwang Jonggi finally shook his head. It was said that most geniuses were eccentric, so it was understandable that people like Chongmyung were eccentric. However, it was difficult to hide their expressions when they could see such bizarre things from the sidelines. Anyway, don't neglect his meals. Yes, young master. And give him drinks too. Yes. In the end, he turned around and left without being able to find anything. He is an individual I cannot keep track of. But one thing was certain. Each time Chongmyung made a move, Mount Hua would have huge gains. So maybe it would be the same this time too. Every time he moves, he carries wind and fortune on him, so he can be called a dragon. Why didn't I think of that? Chongmyung slapped himself in the head and rolled over. If Hwang Jonggi had seen that, he would feel bad for thinking such great things about this man. But Chongmyung didn't have time to think about any of that. Do I have a hole in my head? Why couldn't I think of that? I should have listened when Sayoung told me to study. Chongmyung was currently living a life after rebirth where half of his life was being lost in regret. However, this couldn't be called Chongmyung's fault. It was by no means an easy task to memorize a martial arts method. Moreover, when it came to advanced martial art techniques, the structure alone would exceed the numbers of thick books. It was impossible to memorize all of them perfectly. If a person's ability to memorize the technique was perfect, what was the purpose of books? Normally, the lack of memory retention was substituted with the body getting used to the teaching. But now that the situation was reversed for Chongmyung, putting the technique down on the book was becoming quite tough. No, is it like this? No, it's like this. It was shocking. He could perform it, but he couldn't write it down. A perfect house had already been built, but the blueprint was lost. So, the only possible method now was to tear down the house and recreate the blueprint. No, why can I not remember it? Just why do I have such a bad brain? I wasn't like this in my previous life. Chongmyung couldn't exactly remember the contents and continued to slap himself in the head. And then, suddenly, he stopped. I remember. This isn't so bad. I'll hit my head, make it hurt, and then remind myself of the basics. If this was the case, Chongmyung's head would be broken before he could remember all of it. Aha! He ran to the desks and picked up the brush. He then scribbled down the sentences that had come to his mind. This is it! Once the blockage was cleared, it had all came out as if his previous troubles had been a lie. Then, when it got blocked again, he just proceeded to hit himself again until he remembered it. It had been 3 days since he continued doing this. Thanks to that, there were already dozens of completed books piled up in the corner of the room. Bamboo Leaf Hand, Plum Blossom Full Body Combat, Falling Flower Steps, Thai Virtual Growth, Thai Finger. It would raise suspicion if only the martial arts that had been missing showed up, so he had to write down a few existing martial arts. Done! Chongmyung lifted the completed one. Dark Fragment Wind. There were too many now. He tossed the book in his hand into the heap, and then he looked at the pile. Right. The martial arts of Mount Hua were this colorful and diverse. Just thinking about it gives me the creeps. If he hadn't been revived like this, he felt scared at the thought of all the martial arts that could have been lost forever. Just thinking about it is making me go insane. Chongmyung was still infuriated with the people of the demonic sect who had attacked them. The 9 great sects who didn't help Mount Hua in their time of need also made him angry. Do you think I will forget about this grudge? I'm Chongmyung, you bastards. I let you go since I was busy for a while, but I didn't forget about any of you. I'll break all your heads. Chongmyung let out a deep sigh. Now everything is almost done. There were now 24 books neatly stacked in front of Chongmyung. This is a problem. When he came here, he was planning to write down just the 24 movement Plum Blossom sword technique. However, for some reason, it was postponed to the end. And now, he was thinking. There was no way he could delay it any longer. What do I do? Chongmyung nodded and sat down with his arms crossed. Was he stuck? There was no way. He might be able to forget all the other martial arts in the world, but he would never forget the 24 movement Plum Blossom sword technique. It was the root of Mount Hua in Chongmyung. Forget just writing it down. He would even be able to draw it if it was required of him. But there was a reason why he hadn't done it till now. Which one should I write down? What he had to write down was the 24 movement Plum Blossom sword technique. The problem was that Chongmyung knew 2 ways to practice it. One was the basic method that had been passed down inside Mount Hua since ancient times. The other was a modified version that had been created by Chongmyung. This wasn't something that was too unusual. It was obvious that a swordsman who had climbed so close to ascension would find the direction which suited him the best when it came to unfolding sword techniques. Chongmyung had already done that before he was called the best, and he had also perfected his own sword in the war against the demonic sect. The modified version was a little more practical and a little more radical, but it was in the form that best suited the Plum Blossom sword saint Chongmyung. Chongmyung scratched his head. No matter how much I think about it, my 24 movement Plum Blossom sword technique would work better for the current Mount Hua. First of all, it was easier to teach, and even the learning speed would be faster. Above all, since it focused on practicality, it would have a much greater effect when dealing with other sects. Fast and efficient. According to Chongmyung, in order for Mount Hua to gain better results, this had to be learned. Still, he was concerned. This was because passing on his method would shake the foundation of Mount Hua. If it was another technique, he wouldn't have thought about it this much. He would have unconditionally passed on what he thought was right. However, this wasn't just the 24 movement Plum Blossom sword technique. It was Mount Hua itself. If he changed it, then Mount Hua would no longer be Mount Hua. Sword techniques were tools to kill enemies at the end of the day. Of course, he wasn't someone who would say some nonsense like it was used to polish discipline. It is the connection, the blooming concept that Mount Hua pursued. The sword technique that perfectly embodied that spirit was the 24 movement Plum Blossom sword technique. If he clumsily transformed the sword technique, there was a chance that even the spirit of Mount Hua might turn clumsy. Chongmyung, who had been scratching his head until it bled, immediately dropped his hand and sighed. What do I do? Should I follow the basics? Or should I start over? Thinking, he lay flat on the floor. Sahyung, my sect leader Sahyung, what do you think would be better? When he asked the question facing just the air, he thought he heard something faintly. Why bother thinking about something like that? This isn't like you. I wouldn't worry if it had something to do with me alone. I'm not worried because I'm afraid. I'm just worried that I will have to hear you nag me. You damn bastards. If possible, come along and help me. Sending me alone and making me do all the work. What is your concern? I wonder if it's right to transform the technique our ancestors gave us. Can't you give them both? Saying something like that after knowing everything? If I give them both the techniques, they will go on and on about what was right and what was wrong between themselves. After about 100 years, there would be factions within the sect divided based on the techniques they learn. Because that was how humans were. Of course, he now believed in the disciples of Mount Hua. However, Chongmyung couldn't continue to hold power once he died, and it wasn't a good idea to pass on two techniques of the same martial art if he wanted Mount Hua to stay as one. Then what is the problem? Oh, for real, the ancestors. Aren't you their ancestor? Huh? Chongmyung tilted his head. What was that? Is there another ancestor? If they listen to you first and then learn it, that is their ancestors' help they're receiving. Aren't you an ancestor to them? What? Wait, is that even right? Don't worry. Your will is the will of the ancestors, and the ancestors' will is your will. No, your direction is the direction of Mount Hua, and your will is the will of Mount Hua. Just do what you want. No, still. Is that not good too? Chongmyung frowned. Are you really fine with this? The world flows. The world is changing and flowing. And... Hearing those soft words, Chongmyung smiled. Aren't you flowing in the current Mount Hua? And Mount Hua is flowing within you as well. And you are flowing through Mount Hua. Do what you want. That is the most natural growth from Mount Hua. And then the voice faded. Chongmyung jumped up from his place and grabbed the brush. Chongmyung knew that the voice he was hearing wasn't real. It was just his true intention speaking out. Yeah, you're right. I am the ancestor. Is there another ancestor other than me? Of course, he didn't know if the ancestors would decide to whip him once he visited them later. If I don't go to the underworld, it will all work out. At last, Chongmyung decided what he was going to do and opened the empty booklet. And he wrote. He wrote of the sword of Mount Hua and the sword of Chongmyung. At the same time, it was a chance to re-establish Mount Hua's martial arts. His eyes sank. Chongmyung lifted the book up. How long have I been doing this? Well, he didn't know. Since he was writing it down, he forgot to keep track of the time. He clicked his tongue as he looked at the booklets. Although it's not completely satisfactory, this is enough. The missing parts can be filled in the future. Wouldn't it be better to redevelop the martial arts that were thought to be perfect and change the gaps he could find along the way? Making things perfect wasn't always a good thing, so he didn't have regrets. Rather, how do I get this to the sect? If I pack all this up, it would look strange, right? Is that the only way? Chongmyung got up. Hwang Jonggi moved around. It was dark because it was night, and it was his habit to walk around his residence branch like this before going to bed. Hwam has grown so much. At first, he thought it would be too much, but now he admired his father's insight. In addition, he was able to participate in the tea trade with Mount Hua. The Hwam branch was beginning to grow larger than the Eunha main residence. And the relationship with Mount Hua. While he was thinking that, he went wide-eyed. He saw the door of Chongmyung, which had been tightly closed for the last 7 days, finally open. Finally! His face, which had been slightly tinged with pleasure, went stiff. Someone came out of the room. They had full-body clothes that were black in color, a hood covering their face, and a big sack on their back. A thief? No, why is a thief coming from there? It's not just a thief, but a thief who must have a death wish to go into that room. As he was confused about whether he had to scream at the thief or not, the thief waved his hand. Oh, hey, long time no see. No, Disciple Chongmyung. Yeah. What is that outfit? Ah. Chongmyung glanced down at the clothes he was wearing and waved his hand. Don't worry about this. Rather, I need to go quickly now. Where? Yeah, you bastard. Where are you going dressed like this? Where are you going, young disciple? Especially this late at night. Don't worry, I'm just going to drop by Mount Hua. And please, make breakfast. I'll be back before then. Looking at his body, heading in the direction of Mount Hua, Hwang Jong-gi thought, let's forget this. I'll think of it like a dream. That will be good for my mental strength. That crazy bastard.